Let's talk about continuity. Usually when you think of starting a universe mode, you think about how am I going to book the storylines, which superstars am I going to use, what kind of a show am I going to use, how is it going to look, how is it going to feel. But one thing that I feel like gets overlooked possibly the most when it comes to making a universe mode to starting out is continuity. And that's the idea of your universe mode being in its own timeline, in its own world. And this is something that I've struggled with over the course of my universe mode. I started my universe mode back in 2012, October of 2012. And a lot has happened in the WWE since I started my universe mode. But because my universe mode exists in its own timeline, it is not simply copy-pasting what's going on in WWE. It's its own world with its own storylines. Each character is different because I've done different things with each person. They've had different experiences. So when I try to reference a superstar's history or their accolades in WWE, it's going to vary compared to what the real-life WWE has. For example, John Cena is a 16-time WWE champion in real life, but in my universe mode, since 2012, he only won the WWE title twice. So, well, off the top of my head, I don't even know how many championships he had won by 2012. So, usually, rather than trying to tack on, oh, he's a this many time ex-champion, trying to combine the past and add it on my own universe mode as a continuation of that story, that doesn't really work. I do have a separate solution for that, and the reason why that's necessary is because this would imply that my universe mode has been going on for 2 years. Because I only just completed my second year, my full year of universe mode, which would mean that in my timeline, it's 2014. If it was 2014, then you would not have some of the superstars in the WWE today that are realistically gonna start popping up in the future. You wouldn't have TJ Perkins, none of the cruiserweight guys would even be an option because they weren't around in 2014. Although I guess I could try to shoehorn it in and try to make it all one cohesive timeline that just fits perfectly, but it isn't gonna do that. There's gonna be some contrivances in there. So I don't really stick to it is this year, which does make it kind of difficult to reference back to history because I can't say, well, this time in 2014, this guy won a championship. Usually I'll reference back to, this many months ago, this many years ago, he was a former champion. Or I'll just simply forget time altogether and I'll just say, he's Sheamus, for example, a 3-time World Heavyweight Champion, not referencing the last time that he won the title. I usually do that. If I'm going to reference something, I go by pay-per-views or, specific events that took place. That's how I tend to reference back to things. I don't go by time, I do go by years, as there were this many years in universe mode. So when I reference champions specifically, I'll refer to a guy like John Cena as a former 2-time WWE champion in universe mode. Sheamus, a former 3-time World Heavyweight Champion in universe mode. But I make sure to specifically reference it as they're that many times a champion in universe mode. So while I do reference a guy like Batista being a former world champion in the past, because back in 2007, Batista was a world champion at one point. Maybe that wasn't the exact year, but I know Edge was definitely a world champion in 2007. So if I reference Edge as a former world heavyweight champion, despite the fact that he never won the title in universe mode, even that's a bit tricky, but I'll be sure to clarify that Edge has never won a world championship in universe mode. Or a guy who has Sami Zayn. Sami Zayn has never won a championship in universe mode. I'd be sure to try to specify with those terms. And I feel as though, and I think that this isn't really a concept that many people think of when they're first starting out a universe mode, because you're just getting your feet wet, you're just laying the groundwork. So you're probably going to be building off of real life events that took place in WWE. So when you have to think of it several years down the line, if you continue to go on for that far, thinking of, well, history in my universe mode and real life history is completely different. So how the heck do I even reference superstars' accolades? And especially when you start to consider new superstars debuting into your series years down the road, or even just months down the road. Guys like The Shield debuted in my universe mode after, because in WWE 13, The Shield were not in the game. when the game was initially released in October of 2012, the Shield didn't debut until Survivor Series of 2012. So I had to come up with my own way to bring them into the series, so I can't really look back on that Survivor Series event and say, well, the Shield debuted by taking out Ryback and John Cena, because that never happened in my universe mode, because I started before that, and it just didn't happen. The Shield debuted in a different way in my series, and this continues to become only more and more prevalent as we push forward years by years into universe mode. So now you look at a guy like Seth Rollins, who has never won the WWE Championship in my universe mode, has never won a championship in my universe mode. And you look at Seth Rollins in real life, he's a former multi-time WWE champion. He was a tag team champion. He has all these accolades exclusive to real life WWE that I can't really acknowledge in my own series, because that never happened, because 2014, 15, 16, anything that happened in real life WWE never happened in my universe mode. Which is why when I had a match at WrestleMania, Kevin Owens versus The Undertaker, title versus streak, the streak was still alive, because The Undertaker had never lost to Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 30, because The Undertaker didn't face Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 30. That didn't happen in my universe mode. So then it becomes tricky, just how do you reference things? It's really, you just have to keep that type of thing in mind. You have to be aware of what has and hasn't happened in your universe mode. And it does get tricky, because sometimes, I know I've done this on commentary, you slip up and you reference something that happened in real life, or I had some trouble with this with referencing NXT, because very early on, when people like Sasha Banks or Charlotte or Becky Lynch, or even some of the male superstars like Tyler Breeze, and I think more specifically I had issues with like Sami Zayn, Neville, Finn, really the early crop of guys, so Rusev and Corey Graves could be thrown in there as well. It was tricky for me because I would reference stuff that happened in NXT, because NXT wasn't even a part of my universe mode. So the way that I initially saw it was that it was fair game. It was open to anything I wanted to say. But then, especially with the women specifically, when I started bringing them in and I was trying to reference this stuff that took place in NXT, then it does become tricky, because the years get messed up, and because the timeline is all different, it's trying to figure out, okay, well, they did this in 2014, but you've been doing it for 2 years, so that would mean that, like, when this was happening, when one event was happening, this was also happening in NXT, and it does get sort of convoluted. So nowadays, I just completely remove NXT from the picture. Basically, I try to remove anything that has, I guess I would say anything, like, I don't usually reference like New Japan or TNA a lot unless I'm just saying he was in this company at a point in time. Really, the only way that would be in any way confusing or conflicting with what I'm trying to do is if I would end up doing universe mode for like 12, 15 years, and superstars who weren't even on the scene when I started universe mode are starting to crop up in my universe mode. Then that's going to be a bit tricky. But I don't know, am I going to go on for that long? I guess I've already been doing this for like 5 years, so, and I plan to do YouTube full time in the future, so I guess realistically that could be a possibility. It's an easy detail to neglect, and the act of neglecting it could definitely break some semblance of immersion in your series, which is why I try to just avoid referencing NXT at all costs, because then, like, originally when I had brought in, when I did the NXT showcase episode of Monday Night Raw in WWE 2K15, I think I had Sami Zayn come in as the NXT champion, but then I also tried to, I ended up coming up with like this whole storyline that was only posted on, it was in a Brendan Plays Forums post that I completely forgot about because I just never ran with it. I could have tried to make that into a whole storyline and create my own NXT canon, but if I wasn't going to go with NXT in the future, I didn't see any real point in bringing it up. Maybe at the time I thought I might end up doing NXT at some point, and I just didn't do that. So, you know, making this whole storyline with the 4 men who were in that episode, it was just unnecessary. It wasn't, I don't think it really would have, I could have gone somewhere with it, I guess, and then made it something, but I just really think it was unnecessary to even throw that in. I probably shouldn't have even had, I mean, that whole episode just isn't very good. Just bringing in guys from NXT and just saying, NXT exists, it's here, but it isn't, because I'm not making NXT. Ah, man, that probably could, maybe I could make that into some sort of like pretend it never happened post, but I mean, I've already got something discussing, well, part 4, pretend it never happened, partially discusses that issue. I was hoping part 4, pretend it never happened, would have been, you know, I'm not going to turn this into a big discussion about Behind the Universe. That's for a future State of the Channel update. So, funny story, this video was originally like half an hour, 35 minutes, something like that, and it was originally, there was a second point that I started discussing here, but then the script ended up being like half an hour, because I expected this to be like maybe 15-20 minutes me discussing the 2 topics, but then it got out of control, sort of. Not like I rambled a bunch, but just I had way more to say than I was expecting to, so I decided to cut the video in half because the 2 ideas weren't really connected to begin with. I kind of just threw them together in one video to fill time, like to have a decent sized video rather than just like, because I was expecting maybe like 5 minutes a topic, and 2 5-minute videos, I prefer to do like a 10-minute, but I figure splitting it here makes more sense for, you know, to that way shed more light on each individual topic, I suppose. Anyways, I don't have a clever way to end this because this wasn't originally where the ending was, but thanks for joining me, and until next time, keep on YouTubing.